Hi, and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. I'm Jeanie Ryce, your co-host, and today is Aramaic Friday, so we will have Dale Hoffman, and we also have Dr. Tim Hayes with us, and so we welcome you to the show. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1, and that puts you in queue to talk to us. We would love to hear your comments and your questions because that makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart.
You're really hard to hear.
Excuse my GPS. It was starting to give instructions. So, welcome, everybody. We're honored and delighted that you choose to join us to share in this ancient work of forgiveness. And today is Aramaic Friday, so we'll have Dale Allen Hoffman with us, as well as Dr. Tim. I'm actually going to be on the show for just a short time. Since we're on the road today, we start our intensive at Heartland, our 16-day laws of living. And Jeanie and I are in Springfield to pick people up at the airport. So we'll be heading to the airport. I'm actually on the way to the airport. You might hear a little road noise in the background, and my GPS kicks in and wants to yell in your ear. If it does, I'll just put it on silent and say, welcome, everybody. Dale Allen Hoffman's work is available at www.daleallenhoffman.com. I know he's got a residential work up. I don't know whether he has any space in it or not, coming up soon in North Carolina. We today talked about coming forward with, talk a little bit about speech and regulatory speech. And one of the focuses of our laws of living, which is totally based in the first century Aramaic language and culture, we look a lot at a thing called regulatory speech. If you go back 2,000 years ago, you hear Yeshua saying, the power of life and death is in your words. Well, what does speech regulate? Well, the things it regulates is, one, your so-called chemistry, your physiology, your feelings, the output of your mind, your realities. We've been talking the last few days about how perception is such an active process, and perception is based in words. And then the energetic structures that you send out into the world are based in your words as well as your thoughts. Of course, words just being representative of mind energy. And so what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about that idea of if you want something in your life, how do you ask for it in a way that you want it? You know, one of the games of what we call the non-being mind, the mind based in hostility and fear, is that it knows what it doesn't want. Don't you ever talk to me like that again. Don't fall down those stairs and break your neck. Don't you do that. And so we speak about what we don't want, and we give it the emphasis of being what we do want. And so if you go back into the ancient scriptures where they understood this, they talked about the idea that, you don't ask rightly. You're not getting what you want because you don't ask rightly. And if you want someone to speak to you lovingly, gently, and with respect, you better start asking them to speak to you lovingly, gently, and with respect, rather than telling them how you don't want them to talk to you like they can. If you want someone to be safe coming down the stairs, you want to invite them to be safe coming down the stairs, rather than don't fall down those stairs and break your neck. Exact and specific instructions. And the tendency of the mind, especially for the child's mind, is to take things literally. If we don't ever resolve our child's mind, then we wonder why we run into circumstances and situations over and over and over again, and we language them over and over and over again. Sit in the restaurant and just eardrop, listen in on the conversation going on the tables around you. Listen to how many people were just at an organ recital or are doing one right there at the table. Of course, they're talking about who had the latest organ removed, who's having the next organ removed, and my disease was the most terrible the doctor had ever seen. It becomes their red badge of courage, and people who do that wonder why they're sick all the time. People who use language like, to die for. Oh, that chocolate was to die for. It's like, well, careful what you ask for. How about if we have chocolate to live for? And so, excuse my GPS. And so we're going to delve into that with Dale. And Dale, welcome to the show. We're delighted that you're here.
I'm delighted to be here. Good subject. Great subject, actually.
I think it was a good subject.
And the beautiful thing about this is I'll be able to talk about a little bit of it wasn't a quagmire, but sort of where I had to sort of spend time with, I sort of started with the base of, I shouldn't say started with, but at Heartland, when I went to Heartland, going into, actually, as an example, speaking of, what we would say, that the right speech, conscious languaging, and then it came like maybe the reason I wanted to really sort of delve into this today is it came a few years later where I kept coming back to, it was a line in Luke 12, which I can sort of talk more about like in the second half of the show, where Yeshua was saying essentially, don't plan what you're going to say, but just be open in the moment, and Ruach will speak through you, which the interesting part of that is after I spent a lot of time with it, and of course you start working with people, the question that kept coming up, well, what if I'm not able to do that in any particular moment? And that's why it's so important to be able to have, it's not a scripting, it's not like you're sort of copying out and just spitting out words, but to have language that you can speak consciously in the moments that, like as you always say, when the stress is up and the chips are down, when, as much as you say, look, yeah, and in any moment, as long as I'm open, Ruach can speak through me, and yes, that's true, but every once in a while, being human beings, we have moments when something happens and we are completely blotto blind, and there's almost no chance of us having that, or very little chance, I should say, of us letting go and being open in the moment. It's great to be able to have words that you can lean on, essentially, that are very consciously chosen in the moments that you're not able to do that consciously yourself. It's such a hugely incredible tool, and it's so incredibly valuable. And it's the interesting thing is there's not a lot of people out there talking about this. Not sure why that is, but
I think that one of the traps that people fall into as well, because they've been trained, they have to be right, they have to do it right. And so what I see a lot of people doing, excuse my GPS, a lot of people want to say it right. Well, just tell me the right words to say. If I'm saying it wrong, and it's like, no, in terms of regulatory speech, nobody's saying that you're saying anything wrong. We're just asking you to pay attention to what you're creating. And so it's not about learning the right words to say, but I certainly hear you with and agree with you that having something when I'm in the middle of my muddle to fall back on to bring me back on track can be really useful. Of course, that's what all the tools are about, to get me back on track. But as opposed to learning the right way to say it because I said it the wrong way, no, it's that I said it exactly the way I meant it, and if I pay attention to it, and it's not what I want to create, then I want to be forgiving that instead of, well, just teach me the right words to say, not where the game is played. It's going in and changing the root of the output of the mind. There's one of the Beatitudes, and it didn't make it into the translation of the Beatitudes poster that we published, but because we couldn't really 100% say that was accurate, but there's one of the Beatitudes that implies that those who are in possession and control of the source of their thinking. And so to be in touch with those unconscious dynamics, and the beauty of our words is they always put us in touch with our either conscious or unconscious dynamics. And what we always proceed to not, with a not, is always an unconscious thing that we really are trying to avoid as opposed to stepping into conscious creation. So
that's a big... I was going to say that's a huge, huge aspect is the goal, is having that. I spoke, a little bit a couple weeks ago about a sort of an interesting interview I had done, and it was after I had let go of my need, the goal that I had to get the host to understand anything that I was saying, or the goal that I had to have him, I was just needed to constantly. I felt I so needed to constantly clarify everything I was saying because he was constantly restating everything I said, and when he would restate it, he would flip it almost perfectly opposite of what I was saying. And I kept holding on. I was like the monkey with my hand in the tree on a coconut or something, and I just could not let go to let my hand come free until I finally did get, and what I did was I sort of fell back into the conscious languaging. and got to the point where maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way into the interview, I just let go. I canceled the goal, and I went, you know what? He doesn't hear anything I'm saying anyway, so what's most important here is that I come from my center. And I completely dropped the goal, canceled the goal, totally forgave that. And then from that point on, the intense resistance wasn't there anymore. And it was an interesting experience that I'm even now, like 3 weeks later, coming into a deeper realization of that, wow, there was those moments when my hand was grabbing it and I was not letting it go because I was right in my head. I was right. I was correct. You're taking my words and you're mangling them. Yes, of course that happens in human relationships. But yet I was holding on so much that the intensity kept getting more and more intense, and the hostility started coming up on both ends. Definitely I felt mine. And it was finally when I just let it go, which is a song that my little girl sings like 18 times a day, Let It Go. If we're in the car, we have to listen to it 20 times in a row, again. But from the movie Frozen. But yeah, just finally, just removed the root, pop, dissolved right in front of my eyes. Amazing. It works. I mean, it actually works if you work it. It's not just the talking about it. It's actually doing it. It's living it. It's putting it into practice. Changed everything.
Michael, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
But we could hear Dale.
Ah, yes. So let's talk about life. Hi, Tim. Hi, Jeanie.
Hi, Dale.
How you doing, Dale? Glad you're here. Hi, Tim.
I'm phenomenal. I'm very high energy today. I'm so excited that my book is getting ready to go into the copy editing stage, and then from there, it's going to be, we're going through the publisher thing. There's already a few publishers waiting, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, it's amazing how when you actually just do it, it's not about the talking about it, of course. It's about actually living it. And I remember actually, Jeanie, it was one time you probably wouldn't remember this. It was right in Michael's house, right at Heartland. It was over Labor Day weekend, and we came to visit with our kids and a friend of our kids. And Lucinda and Mikey were having like a tiff at the front door there. I don't remember. I have no clue what it was about whatsoever. And I remember you stopping, and you got down on one knee, and Mikey was, indefinitely in a state of overwhelm. Lucinda stormed out of the house, and which, of course, kids do. And I still remember it was like your demeanor, the energy, your essence, your consciousness was so soft. It was so non-threatening. And what I kept hearing the thing that really stuck with me is I kept hearing you saying, okay, so Mikey, what I hear or what I feel you saying is, and you were constantly asking him questions, and you were sort of getting it out of him, allowing him to express and not making it wrong, while also at the same time letting him understand that when you launch into this hostility mode, you're the one that's feeling it. You're the one that's going to have to walk around with that in your body. And it was it was so great for me because, of course, as parents, it's so easy to go blotto, and it's great to have someone that is sort of outside or appears to be outside that can come and sort of help recalibrate us as parents who are able to hold that space when we maybe in the moment aren't able to or aren't doing it, I should say.
Oh, thank you.
That was probably about 7 years ago. But
yeah, I do remember you all coming. So I had forgotten about that, but I remember getting some toys from the basement for them to play with and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They grow up so fast.
Yeah, I know. Well, Mikey's actually almost as tall as me, taller than Loretta, way taller than Lucinda. So, and he's the middle child. So, but yeah, it's I feel that it's like one of the things I talk about in a lot of my talks, and actually I'm going to be in Ohio, in Medina, Ohio this weekend, Unity in Medina, and a little home gathering in Strongsville outside of Cleveland. But like the core of my talk is about, being open in the moment and, essentially being spoken through, but yet a good chunk of that is going to be about that. What about the times when you feel like you can't? even though you know it works and you know that's the sensible thing to do, and you know that if you don't let go, you're going to continue to suffer, you're going to continue to feel all this hostility and all this awful feeling that's moving through your body, but yet sometimes still we're just not letting go. And I mean, that's why it's so incredibly important, because especially when you're in sort of the family atmosphere, I always make the joke that it's great if someone can go and meditate on the top of a mountain alone or with 10 other meditators for 10 years or for 30 years away from society, but I'm not really all that interested in their level of awakening unless you can pull them down into society, into sort of the grossness of human stuff. And that's what I want to see, you know, take people that are whatever, that seem to be so amazingly great as a communicator in all of the spiritual stuff, but let's see them with their family. That's when you'll find out who they really are. So, oy vey, beautiful.
Isn't it awesome how having children is like having the unconscious mind hanging out in true living color and Dolby sound?
Oh, yeah, and you told me that, as a matter of fact. Well, I heard you say it many times before I had children, and then, yeah, I had sort of forgotten it when, you know, you and I had sort of lost touch, and then all of a sudden, bang, and you came back and you made that statement, and I went, doing. It was almost like, you know, someone hitting a bell that was in my head, like, hello, Dale, remember all that? So, yes.
Well, and also another aspect of the words to me, you know, you talked about when you don't feel like it, and, you know, if you ask most people why they did what they did, well, I felt like it. It's like, well, then here's the game. Here's the next piece of work for you to do, and that is you absolutely have to stop and never again do what you feel like doing. You select a set, or else your unconscious will be driving your behavior. You set yourself a set of principles that you're going to live by, and then you teach, you discipline, you properly teach your mind to live by those principles, as opposed to doing what you feel like doing, because that's one of the problems in the world. People who puke on everybody, you know, that commandment that says love your brother as yourself, unfortunately that, to a large degree, and sadly, because in many cases of what the churches has done, that's exactly what people are doing. They're loving others as themselves, and they've been told that they're garbage, that they're worthless, that they're sinners, they're evil, they're nasty, and so they have lost love of self. You know, when we bring people into intensives, and you look at that level of self score, 100, we see good religious people whose love of self is 25, 30, 35. What happens? They're loving their neighbor as themselves. That's why the score on love of others is 25 and 30 and 35. They're doing exactly that. And so feelings come from all of those unconscious dynamics. And so I think we need to be able to bring back to awareness what we're feeling and heal it. And in the meantime, live by the principle we've committed ourselves to, which, of course, is a very tall order. But that's the game.
Wow. I'm just blank. I have nothing to say. I'm just completely blank right now.
I hear you. Let's see what Dr. Tim has to say, and I'm getting ready to drop off to pick people up at the airport. So, Dr. Tim?
Well, Dale, one of the things that you said was you just have to do it. And a question I get asked often is, well, how do I do that? How do I cancel a goal? How do I let it go?
It's a good question. You know, there was when I was speaking, it was a couple weeks ago, speaking about that interview, someone had asked, you know, what was going on for me in those moments? Like, what was I doing? Were my eyes open? Were my eyes closed? And then she also asked a great question, which was like, when you're standing in front of someone, do you just close your eyes and do the thing? And for me, it's almost like going through a short form of the worksheet. It's like the first thing, the absolute essential is to recognize that you're doing it. You recognize that you've essentially lost control. You're not letting go. But recognition still it's not actually forgiveness. It's just, okay, I've recognized that. You're sort of naming it, the trigger. And a lot of times we name the trigger, if we're honest with ourselves, we name the trigger and we go, yeah, but, you know, so what? I'm still right, so I'm not going to let go. For me, the next aspect is the breath. It's so important, you know, all those different steps of the worksheet, breathe, 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 breathe. So in me, I'll generally take my thumb. I mean, this is, something if it's on the phone and I'll actually take my thumb and put it over the mouthpiece, and I'll go and let out a big breath. And then while this is what happened like in the interview, and I just took a breath. I had already recognized what it was that I was holding on to, and I literally, in my mind, I said, cancel, cancel, cancel. I'm letting it go, and I just dropped it. And I literally said that actually physically out loud, although you don't necessarily have to. But, I mean, in terms of a process, like sort of a real-time, every day, you're in the middle of the situation in the workplace or out on the road, in the traffic jam, or with family, willingness is really the cosmic grease, what Michael says all the time. It's like I feel once I recognize it, I have to take that what I call a proactive vulnerability. It's actually something that's used with tech and computer companies, and I use that, with my work, the proactive vulnerability, where I'm allowing myself to just open up and letting go, and I do that by taking a breath. I've recognized it, I've identified it, and I take a breath, and I literally let it go. I don't really go too deep, honestly, when I'm in that real-time thing is, okay, I'm feeling hatred, I'm feeling, anger, I'm feeling sadness. I'm actually not so much in the identification mode when it's happening real-time like that. What's actually usually going on for me is that I know I can feel it, I know I don't like the way it feels, and I'm willing to let go of my goal. And sometimes it takes a few times of just going in there, taking a really good breath, even a simple quick sigh, and just dropping whatever it is that I'm looking for. And that means really dropping it, meaning in my mind, I just allow whatever is in my head to literally empty out. It's almost like pulling the plug on the drain of a tub. My head is so full of all the things I have to communicate. My head is so full of all of the correct things that I'm trying to get across in this situation to help them see just how right I am and how wrong and incorrect they are. But what I do is I just pull the plug through my breath of letting the tub empty out, letting my mind empty out, and I literally, anything that I'm holding on to that I really needed to communicate in this moment, I let it go. And that would be the perfect time for, like if someone's not still completely comfortable, it doesn't happen on the first, your first experience. Not everybody's just going to come straight out of the gate and all of a sudden being spoken through from the center point of their being. That's when it's so important and it's so richly valuable to have a conscious base or a conscious bed of language that you can actually say from that sort of that place of almost like a sweet light. And sometimes it's best to say nothing. But what I literally, it's in Luke 12:11. Let me read this from Yeshua. He says, without going too deep into what's before, let me actually go to 10, Luke 12:10. And anyone who says a word against the Son of Man, it will be forgiven him, shbuk. But he who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit, I'll say, will not be forgiven. That's so important because that blasphemy means to cut or constrict something away from its source, and blasphemy against the Holy Spirit literally meant to stop breathing, because if you're not breathing, then she can't move through you and release those things that you're so intensely holding on to. And that doesn't mean that it's unforgivable for eternity, though I have met people who are in absolute terror thinking that's what that means. That means while you're not breathing and you're not open and you're unwilling to let go of whatever your goal is in that moment, she can't move through you. And then going on to 11, it says, when they bring you into the assemblies before the chiefs and authorities, do not be anxious about how your breath should depart. And I'll say this, that word breath, of course, is rucha, which is not simply breath. That also means force. It's breath, it's wind, it's spirit, it's energy, cosmic expansion, electricity. It's speaking not simply of your physical, it's not necessarily your physical breath. That really means the force or the life force that's moving through you. Do not be anxious about how your breath should depart or what you should say, for the Holy Spirit, the all-embracing breath, Ruach HaKodesh, will teach you which that word teach means to draw out the essence. We'll draw out the essence of you within that moment of what is worthy that you should say. Now, as I said, not everybody on the first crack is all of a sudden going to go down into the depth of their being and be spoken through on really deep level. That's why that language is so important, because it allows us to let go and know that there is, you could almost say, a safety net. There is something that I can say that is, consciously memorized, yet can come from that place of sweet light that I speak of and can come through you. And eventually you go a little bit less from that and you go more into the open space. But even me, 18 years or whatever after learning a lot of the conscious languaging, it still comes out, because there's still moments that I lock up and I'm not being completely open in. It's a huge, huge, huge aspect that, like I said, it doesn't seem like really a lot of people are speaking about it.
Well, that's part of what I try and communicate. I think you were far more eloquent than I am, but one of the things that I keep trying to get people to do is just breathe and focus on the breath, because without that, there is no new beginning. And the other thing is that there's the recognition that my mind has been so conditioned to want to be right, to figure it out, to pick up the logical tool, even if I'm using it as a weapon against myself. It's hard to put down the tool that I have a belief is going to help me, even though the use of the tool is what's causing the problem in the first place. That's what David Bohm calls that sustained incoherence. And, in various schools, they talk about how if you put a ball in your hand with the palm up and the ball is just sitting there, and then you just turn your hand over, leaving your hand open, the ball falls out. That's not the problem. Letting go isn't the problem. The difficulty is in stopping myself to reach down and pick up the ball again, to go back to the logical thinking, to try and figure out from the old pattern, which is the part of what caused the whole problem in the first place, how to find an exit when that actual process is what's creating the prison I'm locked in.
You know what that gets me thinking of? I think it gets me thinking of Albert LaChance and how Albert often speaks about how it's not necessarily sinning. It's not necessarily somehow doing a bad thing that is bad. That's something we do as humans. It's the addiction to want to constantly go back to it. It's feeling, sort of like a pseudo life, or that the physiology, when that stuff starts going through the physiology, whether it be hatred or fear. Michael hits it right on the head when he says hostility is the greatest drug in modern culture. It really is, because it's like a synthetic feeling that somehow I'm alive because my blood is going and my heart is pumping. And it's something that brings people back. Interesting, in like a lot of the psychological studies of Joseph Chilton Pierce, and I can't remember this one guy's name, where they talk about the actual chemical that's in the brain with addicts, that if they, as an example, let's say that they do drugs or they drink or whatever it may be, if they don't find ways to remove those roots of the suffering in their being, do that forgiveness process, then what they'll do is they'll seek to find a chemical equivalent somewhere in their physiology. So then maybe they'll go to pedophilia, or maybe they'll go to whatever it may be. And I'm trying to think of even the chemical. But it's intriguing how we may somehow drop one addiction and then pick up another and pick up another, or drop it and then pick it up again, and drop it and pick the same one up over and over and over again. But it's all in the practice. I feel that each time it's the willingness to let go, and I mean the willingness is the big key, and then the willingness to stay centered, to stay focused, not necessarily focused on the center of being, but keeping the breath moving and keeping yourself open, knowing that as soon as I pick it up, I'm closed off again. The veil is now in the portal of the temple. It's in the doorway, and now the energy is no longer flowing again. Interesting how that's what Yeshua was essentially saying. If you he's saying, look, if you're open in the moment, you don't have to plan out whatever it is that's going to leave, you just have it there, and it opens, you stay open, and it communicates through you, whether it's in words or in silence or in an expression, the touch of a hand, whatever it may be. And it's a huge piece that, of course, I think we've all done it. We've had times when we're really good at dropping it and staying open, and then somehow we come back into that time when we keep picking it up, and we pick it up again, and we pick it up again. But every time you pick it up, it's the willingness to let it go. When you pick it up, the willingness to let it go. When you pick it up again, the willingness to let it go. And, we've learned so much I think we could have from Robin Williams. There was a great, it wasn't really an editorial, but an article in the Asheville Citizen-Times here, a writer, she had written this great thing about depression and saying how people were like, oh, it's such a selfish thing to take your life. And she's like, well, if you actually are around someone in that kind of deep depression, the truth of the matter is the way that they've blinded themselves, the way they're looking at it at that point is that they're letting everyone else off the hook because they don't have to toe the line for me anymore because I know that they're having to constantly pick me up, and they look at it as almost like a mercy thing. And depression, it's not something, just like Michael would say, when all this stuff is resonating up, it doesn't make sense, and it's not very coherent, the sustained incoherence. It's not something that makes sense whatsoever, but when you're standing in the middle of that muck, it's all you can see, and you're blinded to anything else until we have the willingness to let go. And you can just think of how, in those, bless his heart, Robin Williams, in those final moments that he just somehow felt he just couldn't let go. He just couldn't let go, and the pain was so intense. And it wasn't anything about getting through this day. It was like getting past this minute until it got to the point where he wasn't even able to let go of the minute itself. And I really, truly hold the blessing and the space that, as us as a culture, that we're going to learn something from the loss of such an amazingly talented, incredible person, and hopefully be able to get something from this, that we're not just going to go a couple of weeks and it'll sort of simmer back down again. And it's the thing, though, our culture, we don't talk about that stuff openly. Like Michael would say, flip through the TV. How often will you actually hear, I feel, when you said that, I felt something come up within me, and I love it if you could support me in healing that. What? You don't hear that on television. It's time to get this out into the culture.
I would have to agree, and I think the one of the things I keep trying to tell people is I spent probably the first 45 years of my life with the conditioning that said if I'm feeling something, it came from my circumstances or what somebody else did or didn't do, and that includes my training as a licensed clinical psychologist. So 45 years of conditioning probably isn't going to fall away with one or two applications of the forgiveness process. And I just keep trying to encourage people, very much like what you just said, just let it go again. And it comes back, or my mind goes back to it. And then I tell my mind, okay, you've been here before, let's let it go again. And with the repetition and the willingness, Michael refers to that as the cosmic grease. I like one of my siblings went to a holistic doctor, and he gave her a whole process for detox and cleansing, and put her on these vitamin shakes, all food-based stuff. And she started to feel a lot better. She'd spent her entire life, she was about 50 at the time, and she'd spent her entire life on medications, on antibiotics, etc. And he put her on this process, and she started feeling better, and she lost a bunch of weight, and she was feeling better, but she wasn't completely better yet. And she said, how long am I going to have to do this? And he laughed, and it had been, 3 or 4 months already. She had 50 years of her life living on medications and living in one illness and another. And he said, let's do this. Why don't you just give me 1 month for every year you've had this problem? And she groaned, because for her that would be 50 months. But it helped, even if that's not a literal formula, it helped her have the perspective of how many years she had been conditioning her mind and conditioning her body to a certain behavior and a certain set of thoughts and a certain set of toxins. And it's not going to be done overnight. However, she was feeling better within the first few months, and she continues to feel better on a regular basis.
You know, there's so many people that call into the show that are saying that, you know, why is it, I feel like since I started doing this work, all of a sudden it felt like everything was just completely falling apart. And it is really important to have the support system and someone to be able to ask that kind of a question about, because like Michael says, it's not Dr. Feelgood. And it's true that, and it's so important. It's so important to remain positive. It's so important to not, you know, when you are sort of dredging through the stuff, which is kind of what it feels like sometimes. It feels like slogging through all of this garbage. And it's so important to be able to stay focused on the light aspect and to be able to constantly, as you're saying, constantly let go. The willingness is the cosmic grease. To as Yeshua said, Eitz Fatach in Aramaic, to be open, to be open, to be open. When you feel like you're going down again, be open. When you feel like you're grabbing it again, be open. Be open, be open, be open. And, you know, I've said this before on the show, and I say it in a lot of my talks, that for so many years I had, like, different words, and I didn't really do it as a full-on, full-blown practice, but I would have the word love at the top of my awareness for like a week or two, and then it would become peace, and then it would become stillness, whatever it is. But about 8 years ago, right at the time I started doing this full-time without working for someone else, the word became open. And it was actually, it happened the time when I did a water healing. It was in 2007, actually, in October of 2007, the first what I call water healing I had ever done, and anointing. And the word that kept coming through was be open, be open, be open, 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 open. And it's been my word ever since. It's almost like, I love it. You know, the Lakota say, let the wind blow through you. It's that awareness that they're only able to hook you if you're holding on to something. Literally, it's a funny thing. We hold on to whatever our broken spot is, and we hold it up and we show everybody, here it is, hook it, please hook it, push it. There's a big red button on it. Once you push that button, put a little barb into a hook and just jam it right onto it. Here it is, please grab it. And then we're so offended and we're so pissed off or whatever it may be, we go into such a rage when people hook it. When, if we're honest with ourselves, on so many levels, it was the very thing we were looking for, because we're somehow mistaking that insane physiology of everything running amok and the heart beating out of the chest and the hostility and the fear, we're mistaking that for real life. And that's why I say it's so important to consistently, to be open, to let go, to be in that state of willingness, to be able to be the open space, so that we're not sort of latching on to all this stuff that's coming out. And that's one of the major barbs that people have, like when they hear Michael's book title, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And they just immediately go into a judgment, oh, well, I don't want to relive all this junk again. I've already let go of all that. And it's a funny thing, because 9 out of 10 times when I hear someone say that, you can feel like a hostility, like an offended offensiveness. Like they don't want to go there because they know they actually haven't removed any of that. What they've done is they've taken a little paintbrush and dipped it in a little sugar, and they've painted this sugary coating on top. But they haven't actually taken care of that fire that's raging within. That's why it's so important to be open in every moment, to keep staying on the positive, and remember to find a support system of other people around you, like this show, which is 5 days a week. I mean, that's a huge commitment that y'all have made. I'm here 1 day a week, and that's a big commitment. So,
awesome. Some of the conversation that's going on in the chat room goes along with that, except it's looking at it, you know, where y'all are talking more of the negative. In the chat room, we're also talking on the positive, that, you know, if you think that your happiness comes from somebody outside of you, to the same way as we say, you know, somebody, you know, made me angry or made me sad or made me afraid. If we think that we're only happy when we're in someone's space. Then when that person's gone, then our happiness will be gone too. It's all inside, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And we do have a caller.
Okay. I will say real quick before we take the caller, we actually used to do, and I've done quite a bit in groups of doing actually worksheets around actually a happiness or that exact thing of thinking that somehow, like, I have to be in their presence in order to be happy, and if I'm not in their presence, then I'm not happy. And it's an amazing thing to do a worksheet on just a thought that's not necessarily tagged onto something that we would consider to be negative, because it brings up some amazing stuff. It was actually Jerry Collette who sort of started us on that about 10 years ago doing that. It's pretty powerful to do that sometimes.
Right, yeah, I agree, totally. The caller, I think, might be Mark. It's area code 630. You're on the air.
Thank you, Jeanie. Hey, Dale, and hey, Tim.
Hello.
We talked last week just a little bit, Dale. I called in about the cross thing, and
yeah,
I had another thought that I wanted to share, and it's a little different. I was triggered a little bit by some of the earlier conversation, and then appreciated so much of the clarification, because I do what you said you did last year or in the last years, where you use a word, and then there's kind of a word for a week that kind of means something, and you're exploring it and expanding it, and then it becomes another word. And the word I found is really important, because it carries forward the meaning of all the previous words. It kind of extends life into the moment. And so I've been finding that I've been able to process extremely quickly, especially with the positive things. But the area where I got triggered was in the breath conversation, and I wanted to share it, but I didn't want to share it in the way that I did when I got triggered. And so I worked on it, and you guys gave me just enough time. And so I'm going to attempt to do it in an alternative way that's going to be much more positive than the way I would have done it. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So when I was working on this, when I was working on the air, the breath being the air, I would do a lot of breath work, in and out, in and out. I tried whole brain posture from Psych K. I tried higher brain living. I tried all these things, and they all worked. They were all really effective. The still point breath is really extraordinary, and I always resort back to the still point, because that's something that tends to process things very quickly for me. But one of the things I noticed, and I noticed it actually playing a video game. I was playing with my son, and I was playing Call of Duty, and I noticed as I'm sitting there shooting up the bad guys that my breath was being held. And I just said, hey, what's happening here? What's really unfolding? And what I realized was I was holding my breath because of some negative energy. But then I realized the other day, just about a day or two ago, that I had something really extraordinary and positive happening, and I was holding my breath. And so I asked again, what's happening? And the answer was the breath, or the physical breath when we hold it, amplifies whatever energy we are exuding at that time. So if it's a positive energy and we're holding our breath because we're excited, or because there's an energy there of, I'll just say excitement. Oh, that's interesting. I had judged excitement as a positive energy, but for me, I'm a manic individual, so sometimes I go into mania, like this kind of thing, where I'll talk really fast and I'll get these really good ideas, at least in my own head. But what I just realized, wow, this is huge. I judged it as a good thing, but excitement it's not necessarily positive for my life. So I'm going to actually listen to what you have to say, but just sharing that was really extraordinary.
I think a big aspect of it is that in Aramaic, rucha, as well as actually in Greek, pneuma, well, actually in Greek it's really neutered. It's not feminine or masculine. The word spiritus in Latin is masculine, meaning that breath is the air, is basically what that means. It's something physical. But in Yeshua's language, in Aramaic, breath, rucha, is not the air. It's not the air that's moving through us. It's our feminine perception of its movement. which is something different.
That's what I was kind of coming up with, but without those words, because I was saying, even on the way over, I'm at a little Starbucks kind of thing, and on the way over here, I realized, wait a minute, it's not the air that's the breath, it's this movement of life that's moving through us. That's the breath, and when we cut off that...
That's exactly it, yeah, and whatever that goal we have that's being triggered, we're holding on to that, and we're making it thicker and more intense, and then that life force can't get through, and that's where the hostility and the fear gets going, because we're actually putting something in the way of the very thing. We put in bushel baskets over the light, and of course when you breathe, it increases that light, it increases our awareness, but if you're not willing to let go, of course, you know.
Well, could I process something really quick that actually could really change my life?
Absolutely.
I would like to let go of this excitement energy that draws me into the mania. And I'm going to do that in the name of the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Amen. And hold the space from here on out for anyone who might be in this kind of energy, because I just feel like I'm on the cusp of really realizing what drew me to it. And I appreciate you and Dr. Tim and everyone who's been in my life, because this is really a good day. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dale.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
That was all I had.
Cool. Beautiful.
Delightful. And I just want to echo the idea that it isn't the physical breath, although my allowing that physical motion is the thing that keeps that deeper energy moving through me.
Absolutely.
It's that energy of life that's trying to express through me. And you know, one of the things that's come up recently in the Course in Miracles conversations I was in over the weekend was the idea that people are mad at God because of something that happened in their physical world. And in the Course in Miracles, it talks about how God didn't create this physical world. We created this physical world. And, you know, the universe of God is there to be seen underneath all of this physical overlay and underneath all of these negative thoughts and emotions. And it's that energy that lies beneath the physical that's trying to express through me. But if I keep my focus on the physical, and I keep my thoughts in a pattern that says I'm controlling my physical, and that's all that's real, I keep the illusion of separation alive. And then my experience becomes of my illusion.
If we could just get a hold of that. It's something I hear a lot on the road where people will say, yeah, but why does God, you know, allow this world of suffering? It's like, understand, you know, God is not a person. We always have to anthropomorphize. You know, God is the essence, the energy, the truth, and we can do whatever we choose with that essence and that energy. We can create whatever we want to, whether we're for it or against it. And we have to understand that we've created all of the suffering that we're in the middle of. And that doesn't just mean you and me. It means everybody. Every point of entrance of consciousness, of light, as somehow seemingly unique manifestations as human beings, we all are a part of that same essence, energy, and light. And we have to understand that it's not out there. There's not something or something that some circumstance that's going on out there that's somehow away from or apart from us. We're all in that, and it's with each of us just taking care of whatever is up right now in this moment. Sufficient unto this moment are those unripe aspects, or the resonance that's happening right now in the moment. Never mind tomorrow, never mind the day after. Be awake, be conscious, be open and present in this moment. And if we can each just do that and just stay with that moment by moment, the world will transform in a matter of minutes. I mean, it's really not even anything that's bound to time in any way whatsoever.
Hey, Dale.
Yes.
It's Mark again. I just realized as you and Tim were talking I had created, I don't know if you're familiar with Laws of Living. That
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So he has in there word links, and we link words to things. And what I just realized is I linked the physical breath to the breath that we were talking about, the Aramaic breath. I linked them in my mind, and so as you're just talking, I'm like, oh, I could just delink them or allow them to be delinked, because I don't know how to do anything, but I can allow them to be delinked. And so as a matter of course, I wonder if you have anything to say about that, if that's a tendency for people who do breath work, that they link their physical breath with the breath of life.
It's something I get asked a lot on the road, like when people hear, it's also one of those things that honestly I looked at the Aramaic and, gone really deep. I speak more about gender than I think a lot of biblical scholars do. I think because gender in language can be so, it's kind of messy that, not all languages are very clear in how they gender particular words, whatever. But I started really going so deep into the Yeshua teachings and seeing that most of what he's talking about is not physical things. It's not physical manifestations. He's talking about not physical spirit or even physical breath. He's talking about inanimate, not necessarily manifest, but somehow forces of consciousness. Something from a level of perception rather than a level of, seeking some kind of physical thing that we're going to somehow find. And I realized the only way I could really get in touch with that was in letting go of whatever it is I thought it was, whatever I thought the definition of it was. And I did that through my own conscious breath, and I was able to start looking at the Yeshua teachings from almost like a point of like a lack of focus, or almost like an interference pattern. And I was able to start seeing in between the words, in between the lines, and not staring at the definitions of what the words meant anymore. And that's when that essence, that vital experiential essence of what he was saying really opened up in my heart. And yet when I put that out with people and I'm talking about how it's not about physical things, it's about ways of being, it's about attitudes, it's about perception, if someone's not able to let go of what they're so sure is the correct way of looking at the teachings, what'll happen is they'll hear what I'm saying about this perception and the attitude and the ways of being, and they'll look at me and say, well, you're wrong because this is what's right, what that is it's an unwillingness to be open in the moment. Yeshua was talking about constantly being open in the moment, being able to, what I call the cosmic question mark, being able to be okay with not completely understanding or being able to mentally grok what's happening, but yet being able to be willing to feel it, even if you can't put that into words, because the essence of what he was talking about, the kingdom and heaven, these states of being, they weren't things that you could put into words. There's no way to put it into words. Just like the birth of a child, you can put words out there, but none of those is the experience itself, or the way we often speak of chocolate. I can write 5,000 words about the taste of chocolate, which is pretty much completely worthless once you taste chocolate. The definition means absolutely nothing. And it's about the open space rather than the definitions or the words or the beliefs themselves, basically.
That was a beautiful answer. Thank you very much. I'm in a noisy place, so I'm going to mute again and take off. Thank you both for the call. I'll keep listening for the rest of the duration of the call.
Thanks, Mark. So, Jeanie, is there a caller with her hand up? We've got 5 minutes left, or 4 maybe?
We do have another hand up, and it's area code 541. You're on the air. So,
hello, hi, all. Julie from Ashland, Oregon.
It's a little hard to hear you. It's a little hard to hear you. It's like there's road noise.
That would be true. I just took it off a speaker. Is it better?
Much better.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I just want to add a couple of ideas that have come to me recently. The idea of letting go and breathing. I think if we really want to simplify everything, when we exhale, we are letting go consciously, and when we inhale, we are designing consciously. And I really think that's what Michael really was able to capture in his worksheets, because the first half is letting go consciously, and the second half of the worksheet is designing consciously. And then with the breath, I've recently, with several friends dying recently, I've really been looking at a lot. And consciousness is what it is, whether it's in a body or not. And so when we're in a body, we have breathing going on. That's a physical representation of consciousness. But when someone isn't in a body, the consciousness still has that same rhythm, possibly, I'm guessing, of consciously releasing what no longer serves or is unlike love, and consciously designing what we now want. So that's all I wanted to say for now.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful insight.
Thanks.
Yeah, the other thing I would add here in the last minute or so is that in one of Michael's lectures on Course in Miracles, he says, as a quote from the Course in Miracles, that the world we see was created as an attack on God. It's an overlay. It's a way of saying what we can come up with from the ego perspective is going to be better than what was created in the first place.
Hmm.
And again, it's a practice, and it's the allowing, as Michael says, willingness being the cosmic grease. So do you have anything you want to plug here in the last minute or so, Dale?
Just that it's been an incredible show. It went by really fast. And, yeah, I'll be in Ohio this weekend, in Medina and Strongsville. They're both outside of Cleveland. My schedule's packing up really quick for the remainder of the year. I'm going to be pretty much all over the eastern U.S. But I want to say that I'm specifically looking for people who may be willing to do what I'm doing a lot of lately is sort of shadow processing, intensive forgiveness sessions, Saturday sessions, 3-hour things in homes and offices lately. Can even do them on a weeknight that have been incredibly powerful and moving, where people just gather, 10, 15, 20 friends together in the home, and we sort of get really deep for a few hours into like the really deep experiential aspects of the greater aspects of the work. It's been real powerful. So if anybody's interested, I'm easy to get to on my website. Just go on my website, click the contact button, and let us know.
Awesome. And we're down to the last few seconds of the show. Dale, Tim, it has been phenomenal. Thank you all both for being with us. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Hold the space for us. We start our intensive tonight as Michael's coming back from the airport now with 2 of our people. We have 17 people in this intensive, and 10 of them are teachers. So it should be a really high-energy intensive, and we're looking forward to it. And we hope everybody comes back on Monday to our Parent Teacher Day and create the best year yet of your eternal life. Blessings.